Tonight, it's my distinct privilege to be your host and to join with such a distinguished audience in this awards presentation and gala dinner. I'm sure everyone in this room well knows Canada has produced many medical mavericks over the years, of whom Canadians should be exceedingly proud. They've been responsible for discoveries and breakthroughs that have saved lives and affected the health of literally millions of people around the world. For example, the discovery of insulin, the first neurosurgical treatment of epilepsy, the world's first surgical treatment on cerebral aneurysms, the discovery and cloning of the T-cell receptor genes, so significant in the field of immunology, the discovery of stem cells, all major advances, all Canadian. And I could go on and on and on. There are so many more. Not 2 weeks ago, I was emceeing another gala to mark the 50th anniversary of the discovery of stem cells by James Till and Ernest McCulloch. I know a number of you in the room tonight were in attendance that evening as well. I made the point that night, I suppose I was lamenting the fact that most Canadians are unaware of the seminal work of Till and McCulloch, and likely of most other major Canadian medical achievements as well, which is why it is so vital that the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame do the work of preserving our medical heritage. Take a visit to the Hall in London, and you will see that all of the milestones I just mentioned and the scientists responsible for them are already enshrined there. Drs. Till and McCulloch in 2004, Drs. Banting and Best in 1994, the same year as both Dr. Wilder Penfield and Dr. Charles Drake were inducted, Dr. Takwa Mak in 2009. In the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame, they are immortalized, recognized as the heroes they are, and celebrated for their pioneering achievements. Tonight, we will add 7 more deserving names to the list of laureates. We will tell their stories. We will pay tribute to their outstanding achievements. Ladies and gentlemen, 7 more Canadians are about to join the renowned ranks of the Hall of Fame laureates. We have arrived at tonight's main event. Nous voici maintenant au clou de cette soirée, la cérémonie d'investiture dirigée par le président du comité de sélection du Temple de la renommée médicale canadien, le Dr. Alain Baudet. It's my pleasure to invite Dr. Alain Baudet and Dr. Cecil Rohraback to the stage to lead us in the induction ceremony. Dr. Baudet, as you well know, let me introduce him properly, the president of the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, the chair of the Medical Hall of Fame's Laureate Selection Committee. Gentlemen, the podium is yours.
And now, we're ready to begin the 2012 induction ceremony of the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame. Nous sommes prêts à débuter la cérémonie d'investiture 2012 du Temple de la renommée médicale canadienne. Let me begin by introducing you to our first inductee, Dr. John Dirks, a local hero from Toronto, Ontario. Today has been a very busy day for Dr. Dirks, as the organization which he runs, the Gairdner Foundation, just announced their award recipients this morning.
A determined, compassionate leader, a committed global health advocate, an exemplary builder in health, research, and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, Canadian Medical Hall of Fame laureate, Dr. John Dirks.
I'm now pleased to call upon Dr. Dirks to accept this award. Dr. Dirks.
You know, being inducted in the Canadian Hall of Fame to me was a total surprise. I never thought I was of historical interest. But it's been a humbling experience and awesome to be here. And I want to congratulate all my fellow inductees and my personal relationships, particularly with Peter Macklem, who became an assistant professor at McGill the same time that I did. And many good things are said about Peter, but one of the things that wasn't said was his relentless determination to eke out the truth of matters that might be obscure and were not getting proper public attention. Then it's great to see J.G.R. Macleod honored. We had at Gairdner this year a 90th anniversary of insulin discovery. And the conclusion of this event was it was time to make peace. That there were 4 individuals who discovered insulin. There's a foursome, and that foursome should forever be honored at this university and in our country. Then Lap-Chee, I remember very vividly when he came to my office with the front page of Science magazine, which showed the cystic fibrosis gene, a momentous event, and look how he's built on it. And who can forget, when we lived in Vancouver, every newscast every evening would talk about Terry Fox's run beginning in Newfoundland and across Canada, little attention, momentous attention, and then the ultimate sacrifice. But as we've heard, look how this has built. I've traveled a lot in the world, and you go to countries like Cuba or other parts in the world, and I don't know how many it is, they're Terry Fox runs. So this is a wonderful group to be with. I've had an interesting life, and I've been in many interesting cities. I owe a lot to Faye, who's been a great advisor and a loving wife, and kept me straight and narrow through these times. I've been blessed with a great family with John and Peter, Martha and Carol and their spouses, Catherine and Tara, and Michael and James, the sister-in-law Heather Inman, good friend Erlene Collins. So many colleagues in all the cities that we lived in, whether it was Montreal or Vancouver or Washington or Toronto or Karachi or travels all over the world, help one to achieve some goals that were useful. Gardner was mentioned today as particularly important, and I'm very indebted for having the opportunity, and I thank some of our board members that are here, in Joe Rotman, Gary Goldberg, Cal Stiller, and others who make this possible. And I also have a terrific team represented here tonight by Sheila Robinson, Nora Cox, Ron Perlman, and others across the country who make it happen. It's a privilege to be able to honor those who have achieved the highest levels of scientific discovery, but also contributions to leadership and to developing countries where people are less well off, but transformative things are happening now. So this has been a privilege to do this, and as you said, just today, we introduced another septet comparable to the Hall of Fame. In fact, I think Gardner, seeking global stars, is very complementary to the Canadian Hall of Fame, which makes sure that the full dimension of the biomedical sciences is honored. An evening like this can't go by without some challenges, because in this room are those who are honored, those who have been honored, but those also who toiled equally well, whether as scientists who made discoveries, whether as practitioners who had unique surgical or other medical skills, whether they improved the service of health care, and others in the full dimension of our field. And yet we have with us young people here, and that's very good to introduce. We had the outstanding vocalist. So the challenge is to continue to be nation builders in our own field. And Canada is emerging. I think there's a confidence in Canada. When I think of the students that are here, when I think of our grandchildren, your grandchildren, there's a lot to be done, because we're only beginning in this country to be what we can truly become. Thank you very much.
Our second inductee is a national icon, the late Terry Fox from Port Coquitlam, BC.
A cherished son and brother, an incredibly caring role model for millions of people around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Canadian Medical Hall of Fame laureate, Terry Fox.
Receiving the award on behalf of his son is Mr. Rolly Fox.
Thank you. I would first like to mention Ron Calhoun, who is in the room here tonight. Ron, will you stand up and be recognized? And of course, Mr. Isidore Sharp, who was a very great supporter of Terry right from the time that he heard about Terry. Yeah. Fred and I are humbled to be here today representing our brother and son, Terry. When you stand representing the Terry Fox name, you do so with considerable pride. Betty Fox, my wife and Terry's mother, would often say, "I'm only here because Terry cannot be." Now Fred and I stand here in their place. When Terry died, approaching 31 years ago, we found a way to move on, so we are once again finding our way. Our strength comes from our commitment to Terry that we will not rest until his marathon of hope is complete and the suffering that cancer causes has ended. When Terry said on September the 1st, 1980, after being diagnosed with cancer a second time, the marathon of hope must continue without me, Terry passed the baton to thousands of people, creating a legacy that is now 32 years running. Despite his young age, I believe Terry had incredible vision. Terry would say in a way he was sometimes thankful for being diagnosed with cancer. He learned young that life was precious and short. He believed cancer had provided him with a purpose. We witnessed Terry evolve, how he matured through his journey with cancer, how he learned to appreciate life, how he committed his life to helping others. The Marathon of Hope raised $24 million for cancer research in 1980, and that today has, I believe, has raised close to $600 million. Yet Terry was penniless, but in fact, I think he was rich. Rich with the knowledge that he had tried his very best, that he had run until he could run no more. Rich with the knowledge that he had shared his definition of giving, to give and not want or expect anything in return. I'm just going to cut in here a little bit and mention that on Terry's last Christmas with us in 1981, he had to borrow money off his brother Fred to buy his mother and myself and his siblings presents. Here he had raised $24 million and he never had a cent. Anyway, I just had to throw that in there. To give and not want or expect anything in return, and rich in content with the knowledge that his vision of eliminating cancer through medical research was now in the hands of others to continue. Terry asked only for $1, giving each and every one of us the opportunity to be a Marathon of Hope participant. Terry's message was a call out for people to unite, to work together. We admire the work of the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame and have a great appreciation of their efforts to recognize medical heroes and healthcare difference makers in Canada. Fred and I are also thankful to be in the presence of other Canadian Medical Hall of Fame inductees who have devoted their lives to advancing healthcare. There have been numerous awards, honors, and awards acknowledging Terry's Marathon of Hope over the years. He would, with pride, accept this induction, but be quick to acknowledge the Terry Fox volunteers for running with him in 1980 and every year since. Thank you.
Le prochain lauréat est lui aussi honoré à titre posthume. Il s'agit du regretté Dr Armand Frappier de Laval, Québec.
An internationally respected researcher, a tireless builder and collaborator, a passionate leader in the deadly battle against tuberculosis. Ladies and gentlemen, Canadian Medical Hall of Fame laureate, Dr. Armand Frappier.
Je suis heureux d'inviter la fille du docteur Frappier, Michel Frappier-Daigneault, ainsi que le docteur Pierre Talbot, à venir recevoir le prix au nom du docteur Frappier. Le docteur Talbot est l'un de ceux qui ont proposé la candidature du docteur Frappier.
I am Pierre Talbot, professor of virology at the NRS Institute Armand Frappier, and I did co-nominate the laureate. I have the honor to be accompanied by the daughter of Armand Frappier, Michel Frappier-Daigneault, Dr. Frappier's daughter. J'aimerais souligner la présence ici ce soir du petit-fils d'Armand Frappier, Éric Daigneault. Tu peux te lever. Ainsi que des administrateurs de l'Institut national de la recherche scientifique, de l'INRS Institut Armand Frappier, de la Fondation Armand Frappier, ainsi que de la Cité de la Biotech, Biotech City. It is a great honor to have here tonight family members, daughter, grandson, friends, colleagues, and researchers who pursue each in their own way Dr. Armand Frappier's dream and vision, which I do myself as a professor of virology and co-nominator. On behalf of all of us, I wish to personally thank one key person who got the ball rolling this year. A year ago, he wrote me a letter, very moving letter. Dr. Robert G.E. Murray is sitting over there. Like Dr. Frappier, Dr. Murray is a pioneer of Canadian microbiology and founder of the Canadian Society of Microbiologists, which met for the first time in 1952 at the Institut de Microbiologie et d'Hygiène de Montréal, the Montreal Institute of Microbiology and Hygiene, which became in 1938 the Institut Armand Frappier. This institute was created by Armand Frappier mentors at Institut Pasteur in Paris. And it was modeled after Pasteur Institute in Paris. Armand Frappier was a medical pioneer, a builder, a visionary, who created an institute that was innovative, in that it promoted translational medicine, well ahead of others. His motivation was indeed to fight tuberculosis, which was a major epidemic at the time. I personally had the pleasure of knowing Armand Frappier in the last 6 years of his life. And I can tell you that even then, in his 80s, he had an aura around him of personal and professional wisdom. It inspired me, as it inspired his predecessors, and continues to inspire young persons to embrace a career in research oriented towards solution of human health problems. His research center now has 45 faculty members, 100 employees, 200 trainees, all indebted to its founder in a never-ending dream and struggle, Le Rêve, La Lutte, which was the title of his autobiography, finished a few days before his passing in 1991 at the young age of 84. To honor his legacy, in 2004, Armand Frappier Research Institute was joined International Network of Pasteur Institute, which was the first institute in North America. This network is the largest world network to research, train, and intervene in mostly infectious diseases problems. Then, 2 years from now, in 2014, we will bring thousands of scientists to Montreal for the International Congress of Microbiologists, like Dr. Frappier did in 1962. But today we are proud and honored to have Armand Frappier recognized nationally and internationally as a medical hero, the Louis Pasteur of Canada, and dare I say, the Steve Jobs of medicine. On behalf of all of us, including Dr. Murray, who took the time and energy to get the ball rolling, I wish to convey our sincere thanks. Un grand merci à Mme Frappier et tous les membres de la famille, aux amis, aux collègues, Dr. Murray et bien sûr au Temple de la renommée médicale canadienne de reconnaître le Dr. Armand Frappier comme le Louis Pasteur du Canada, le Steve Jobs de la médecine, un héros, une inspiration pour tous, nous tous, les héritiers d'Armand Frappier. Dr. Frappier had a word of wisdom, which I heard many times him mention, and confirmed by his grandson. He had a philosophy about life called equanimitas. Equanimitas. I invite you to be curious and find out what it means. But I can only say to you that tonight is a high time for Armand Frappier's legacy. Nous sommes assurés que la vie et l'œuvre du Dr. Armand Frappier continueront d'inspirer les chercheurs de l'avenir, les leaders de l'avenir. Let's not forget our pioneers. We stand on their shoulders so we can look further without reinventing the wheel. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Our next inductee made his impact at McGill University in Montreal, but is currently living in Clementsville, Nova Scotia. The remarkable story of Dr. Clarke Fraser.
An innovative biomedical pioneer, human genetics trailblazer, outstanding scientist, and superb mentor. Ladies and gentlemen, Canadian Medical Hall of Fame laureate, Dr. Clarke Fraser.
Unfortunately, poor health has prevented Dr. Fraser from attending the induction ceremony tonight, but we're delighted to have his son, Dr. Noel Fraser, here on his behalf. Dr. Fraser, please join me at the front to accept your father's award.
Thank you, Dr. Baudet and Dr. Rohraback. Distinguished guests, I am honored and happy to accept this award on my father's behalf. He wrote this speech and asked me to present it to you, and so, with great pleasure, I thought it would be fitting to deliver my address in blank verse, and so began. O hail, O masters of the Medical Hall of Fame, before whom I shall be hung, at least in name. I, or my avatar, humbly stand before you to be honored for things that I was thought to do to reduce the frequency of death and disease to few. But how, you ask, did my mysterious fate get me to this elevated state? At this point, Dad found the task of iambic pentameter a little too rigorous and reverted to prose. Phew. Now, the primary factor, he continued, was luck. I was lucky to have 2 lectures in 1937 in genetics by Muriel Roscoe in Biology 1 at Acadia that got me hooked on genetics and sent me to McGill for a PhD. I worked on mice, but I wanted to work on people, so I was lucky that after 3 years in the Air Force, Veterans Affairs financed my return to medical school at McGill. I was lucky to appear on the scene just when human genetics was budding. Genetic counseling had not yet been invented. There was no one to follow, so I was able to play a major role in developing the principles of genetic counseling. I was lucky that Alton Goldbloom and Alan Ross at what was then the Children's Memorial Hospital in Montreal saw how genetics could fit into the pediatric picture and let me fulfill my internship requirements by starting a division of human genetics in the Department of Pediatrics. Luck also played a large part in my second career, teratology. Ted Ingalls, a Boston pediatrician, had postulated that Down syndrome was caused by maternal hypoxia, This was before chromosome 21 was discovered, but even then was ridiculous. But he tested this hypothesis in mice and showed that maternal hypoxia caused not Down syndrome, but cleft palate. And this was the first experimental teratogen. I thought it would be nice to bring genetics into the picture by demonstrating murine strain differences to this teratogen. And while my graduate student and I were building the hypoxia apparatus, Hamilton Baxter, a plastic surgeon who let me study his cleft lip families, came by with some cortisone, which had just been invented. He thought, for various wrong reasons, that it might cause neural tube defects in the offspring of pregnant mice. I was dubious, but stuck some cortisone into some pregnant mice I just happened to have in the mouse room, and to my surprise produced not neural tube defects, but cleft palates. And it was soon apparent that there were strain differences. So this was the beginning of teratogenetics. Our group went on to study how the palate closes and how cortisone interferes with closure. From this, we built the multifactorial threshold model that underlies many of the complex familial disorders that are now being unraveled in people. I was also lucky in being able to attract good graduate students, many of whom pursued their own research careers in various parts of the world. Many of these chose to work on mice, thinking that without an MD, they would not be able to study people. I thought this was wrong and persuaded several of them to work on people. Some brought their own skills to the field. They included one who did some land-breaking work on the psychodynamics of genetic counseling. Another defined syndromes using numerical taxonomy, where she had to make her own way, as it was beyond my comprehension. But I was lucky enough to be able to persuade her to marry me. Not me. Without her wisdom and support, I would not be here, even in absentia, today. And to end with more blank verse. Farewell, O masters of the Medical Hall of Fame. Farewell as well to each and every dame. 'Tis I who says sincerely thanks a lot to those who brought me here, or not. To my father.
Our next inductee, Dr. Peter Macklem, made his impact in Montreal, but sadly passed away just over a year ago in February 2011, while residing in his home in Lansdowne, Ontario. Tonight's induction is one of two very special ways that Dr. Macklem is currently being remembered by all those he left behind. The European Respiratory Society and the Canadian Thoracic Society just recently launched the Peter Macklem Joint Fellowship. This program is for European researchers to come to Canada to build capacity and expertise in the area of respiratory health and to promote excellence in research.
An extraordinary creative thinker, an inspired and inspiring physician scientist. Ladies and gentlemen, Canadian Medical Hall of Fame laureate, Dr. Peter Macklem.
It is my honor to invite Mrs. Joy Macklem, the wife of Dr. Macklem, and Catherine Macklem, his daughter, to join me on stage to accept the award on his behalf.
On behalf of my mother and my siblings, thank you to the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame and to those who nominated my father for this absolutely terrific honor that you've bestowed on him. We are very proud of him, and we're sad that he's not with us tonight, but we're grateful to you for the recognition that you are giving to him and to his life's work. My father would be the first to say that his achievements are the result of the work of many people. Some of you are here tonight, and you know better than I do who you are. On his behalf, I thank you. He believed firmly that the best science was the result of dialogue, exchange, collaboration, intellectual challenge, and camaraderie. And you gave that to him. He always saved, though, his most tender thank you to the person who collaborated with him throughout his life. And of course, that's my mom. She was his most... She was his most steadfast, most loyal collaborator. Joy is her name, and joy is her way. They had a life of adventure together. They met when he crashed a party at her house. She was a raving beauty. She was fun, and she was really smart. And he was smitten right from the start. His brother Dick had something to do with that crashing of that party. But of course there was a lineup of suitors that he... And as also many of you would know, he was very competitive by nature. And as one of the offspring of this union, I am most thrilled to say that he won that competition. Their life together was one of adventure. They had 5 children in 7 years. They lived in Montreal, Boston, Paris, Brussels. They traveled the world. They took their children around the world, and I'm losing my place in my notes. The only other thing I want to say in terms of my mom is that as important as my father's work was, and there's no doubt about that, there's no way he could have done that without her. In every life, it's very difficult to have a balance between professional excellence and private fulfillment. And my father couldn't have done it. He did. He couldn't have done it, though, without the support of his colleagues. Many of you are here tonight, nor without the support of my mom. Thank you.
Our next inductee to be inducted again posthumously has been deceased for many, many years. Dr. John James Rickard Macleod, whose discovery occurred while he was working in Toronto, Ontario.
A world-recognized leading researcher, an inspiring collaborator, and determined leader, ladies and gentlemen, Canadian Medical Hall of Fame laureate, Dr. John James Macleod.
Accepting the award on behalf of Dr. Macleod is Dr. Patricia Brubaker, who is the Associate Chair Academic for the Department of Physiology at the University of Toronto. Dr. Brubaker.
When I was 21 years old, I was diagnosed with type 1 insulin-dependent diabetes. Until 1921, this would have been a death sentence. Instead, I continued my graduate studies with a newfound determination to conduct diabetes research as a career. It was with great fortune that I came to Toronto, the mecca of diabetes research in Canada, to carry out postdoctoral studies with Mladen Vranich. A renowned diabetes researcher, Dr. Vranich is an inductee into the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame himself, and is also the last postdoctoral fellow to have been hired by Dr. Charles Best. Thus, I became part of a chain that leads directly from that most remarkable discovery of insulin in 1921. Dr. John James Rickard Macleod, then professor and chair of the Department of Physiology at the University of Toronto, hired both Dr. Frederick Banting and then undergraduate medical student Charles Best to work in his laboratory. Charles Best later hired Mladen Vranich, who hired me. My own graduate students now represent 6 degrees of separation between J.R.R. Macleod and the new generation of diabetes researchers in the Department of Physiology. History now makes it clear that Banting, Best, Collip, and Macleod all contributed to the discovery, production, clinical trials, and licensing of insulin. Although Macleod already had a long history as a successful diabetes researcher, it was his role in the discovery of insulin that led to his Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, shared with Frederick Banting. Both Drs. Macleod and Banting generously and rightly shared the prize with their colleagues. In the Department of Physiology, where Dr. J.R.R. Macleod served as chair from 1918 until 1928, we are proud to acknowledge the outstanding contributions that were made by Dr. Macleod and his team of researchers. Dr. Mladen Vranic, who's here tonight, continues to this day as an active member of the Department of Physiology, and we have a very strong friendship with the family of Charles Best, represented here tonight by his grandson, Mr. Bruce Best. Bruce? Now, 90 years since the first administration of insulin to a young man dying of diabetes, we have not forgotten the importance of this discovery to the world or the researchers that made it possible. I'm therefore absolutely delighted to represent the Department of Physiology tonight on this occasion of the induction of Dr. John James Rickard Macleod into the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame. Thank you very much indeed for this honor.
Our last inductee, Dr. Lap-Chee Tsui, Lap-Chee Chow, traveled all the way from Hong Kong to be here for his induction ceremony. Lap-Chee made an extraordinary discovery while residing here in Toronto, Ontario.
An insightful, creative scientific visionary, brilliant researcher, and exceptional mentor and collaborator. Ladies and gentlemen, Canadian Medical Hall of Fame laureate, Dr. Lap-Chee Tsui.
Dr. Tsui, please join me on stage to receive your award. Congratulations, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am really honored by this recognition. And since I did not really prepare for the speech on the way here, so I did it at the table to make some notes so that I won't forget to say certain things I must say. And it was great to see Francis Collins on the video. And then for the record, those city hotels are actually in London, Ontario. Different standards. I thought they were great hotels for me. Anyway, I think I'd really like to share my honor with all the colleagues that work with me, around me. And I already gave a part of my acceptance speech in the interview. And so I don't want to say any more except to say that I am surrounded by all these wonderful people in Toronto and also in Hong Kong. And as the unknown sage put it, great people talking about ideas, average people about things, and small people about other people. And there are also people talking about themselves. Well, I don't want to be that type. But anyway, I think Cal Stiller, Alan Taylor, and Henry Friesen, who founded the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame, they're really definitely great people. And scientists like myself are average people because we always talk about things. And occasionally we talk about ideas, but of course we have to make the ideas to work. So we're somewhere between great and average. And of course, some of us talk about other people too. And, but from an average person, actually I changed into a small person. The reason is that I change a job and I take up this head of a university in Hong Kong. I'll be the best in Asia. But we deal with the human resources matters most of the time. I think David and Naylor would agree with it. Those become really small people. For that, I think Lou Siminovich calls me a trader. But early this afternoon, there was a symposium at the Hospital for Sick Children in my honor, and there my former trainee and also now working at Sick Kids was Steve Scherer. His genomic research actually led to a great deal more discoveries, and then actually brought it to an entire different level. And I was told he's now operating an enterprise of over $60 million. So that's one thing. And also there was the other speaker, Eric Schorcher, professor from University of Alabama. He's also here tonight. He is not my trainee. Anyway, he came to talk about the new drugs and therapies discovered some 22, 23 years later. So that was really a fantastic experience for me to look at the research in cystic fibrosis came all the way from the discovery of a gene. And then the most surprising was to hear a talk by Joanna Romans, also former trainee, now working at Sick Kids, about the modified genes from an entirely different approach. Now, I know that this is not supposed to be a scientific presentation, so I'm not going to go on to do that. But the important thing is that we always keep this idea that you do not keep your students or trainees in the same institute. It's actually good for them to go somewhere else. But since they are staying, I had to leave. I think I made a good move. But then it's very interesting. They're making all the fantastic discoveries after I left. And then they still credit all the recent developments to me. There's a very embarrassing moment earlier this afternoon. And then I already said that I often happen to be at the right place at the right time with the right people. And then as I'm a geneticist, I talk about often genes and environment. So you can translate or match up the three with these two. But I think environment is actually very important for scientists. And then so looking at the hospital for sick children, not supposed to advertise too much. But then I think it should really make this all happen with great people there who supported me. And then working with Manuel Bookwell and Jack Reardon, who actually recruited me to Toronto. I thank them immensely for that. And also, early in the afternoon, I talked about the people actually at the CF clinic helping to collect DNA samples or blood samples from patients, not to mention the doctors. And then, of course, the funding bodies. The funding bodies got it to work. And actually, I had a very long presentation this afternoon to say nobody actually believed our approach, even though it was proposed a while ago by other people. So to get it to work required funding, and I'd like to thank particularly the Canadian Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, now Cystic Fibrosis Canada, and also the Sellers Foundation, because they really had no idea what they were funding at that time. But they thought something from Sick Kids must be good. Anyway, so I'd also like to thank Ron Wharton and Jim Friesen. I mispronounced Jim's name this afternoon. I apologize. And because they actually gave me a job to continue this challenging job at that time, and some would thought that it would be actually fruitless. And I don't mention who these people are. But anyway. But last but not least, before I go to the last bit, I'd like to thank Joanna Romans, Bacheva Karam, and the rest of the group. Most of them are technicians, and they really work hard to get the cloning of the CF gene done. And of course, later on, the joining of Steve Scherer, and also help of Peter Dury. And finally, I'd like to thank my family if I can, because I was only given 3 minutes. And then anyway, my family, I have to start with my parents because I am a geneticist. So I think they definitely gave me the good halves of their genes, okay? And then, of course, I have to thank my wife because they helped continue this genetic experiment. And one of our two sons is here, Eugene and his wife, Sherry. And then lastly, the last sentence. Thank you again for putting me into the same group of great Canadians before me. Thank you very much.
And congratulations to all of the 2012 Canadian Medical Hall of Fame laureates. Félicitations à tous les lauréats de 2012 au Temple de la renommée médicale canadienne. I'm now pleased to turn things over to Heather Hiscox for closing remarks.
Dr. Rohrbeck, thank you. Dr. Baudet, thank you so much for leading us in that excellent ceremony, but also for leading your selection committee in the fine work they have done this year. It was an absolute pleasure for me, never having attended one of these before, to listen to the speeches, to meet the inductees, and to learn about them, to be inspired by them. So wonderful selections this year. And if you'll indulge me just for a moment or two before we bring this evening to a conclusion, it's hard to believe because we're not even finished the 2012 ceremony, but they're already planning, in fact, plans are well underway for the 2013 Canadian Medical Hall of Fame induction ceremony. It's going to be held in Halifax, Nova Scotia next year. It'll be the first ever regional event, and it's going to involve all 4 Atlantic provinces. So the date to mark on your calendars for next year, Thursday, May the 2nd, the 15th induction ceremony. Nous avons hâte de vous retrouver pour la 15e cérémonie d'investiture le 2 mai 2013 à Halifax, en Nouvelle-Écosse. If you would like to nominate someone for induction next year, the deadline is June 25th, so that is quickly approaching. All the details you can find on the website. That's www.cdnmedhall, CanadianMedicalHall.org. And that brings us to the end of the evening. Quelle merveilleuse soirée nous avons passé ensemble. Let me thank once again before we go a number of people. First of all, BMO Bank, Harris Private Banking, our presenting sponsor over at that table. Thank you so much. Nos remerciements à BMO, Banque Privée Harris, pour vos contributions au programme de la soirée. Thank you again. Thank you to Janet Tufts and to all the committee members who organized this marvelous event. Thank you to you. Thank you, especially all of our guests tonight, for coming this evening, for paying tribute to the legacy of our laureates, 7 great Canadians whose invaluable contributions have truly made a difference. They have bettered health and they have brought hope, both in Canada and around the world. So congratulations again to our 7 new inductees. And finally, personally, to Dr. Rohrbeck and to all the board members, thank you for inviting me to share with you in such a special evening. Safe travels. Good night, everyone.